betrayal wears the faces of those you love most. Diego Ramos, a feared syndicate boss, woke from a devastating car crash, allegedly blind and paralyzed from the neck down. Instantly, his glamorous fiancée and power-hungry brother abandoned him, plotting to steal his empire right beside his hospital bed. But they made one fatal miscalculation. Diego was faking. He saw everything, and the only person who stayed by his side was Carrie, the overweight, overlooked maid who was about to become a queen. Gunpowder and burnt rubber were the last things Diego Ramos remembered before the world faded into an agonizing, crushing black. The orchestrated crash had been flawless, a seemingly tragic accident on the slick, winding road of the Amalfi Coast, designed to silence the head of the Ramos crime syndicate forever. But Diego was a man forged in fire and survival. He did not die in the mangled steel of his armored SUV. Instead, he woke up in the sterile, heavily guarded wing of a private hospital, battered, bruised, but entirely whole. It was during those first agonizing hours of consciousness, listening to the hushed, frantic voices outside his door, that paranoia wrapped its cold fingers around his throat. Someone on the inside had cut the brake lines. Someone with access to his personal garage. The list of suspects was dangerously short, pointing directly to his inner circle. When Dr. Arthur Pendleton, a physician who owed his medical license and his life to the Ramos family, walked into the room, Diego made a split-second decision that would alter the course of his empire. Pulling the doctor close by the collar, Diego issued a terrifyingly calm ultimatum. The medical report was to be altered. As far as the world, his family, and his enemies were concerned, Diego Ramos had suffered catastrophic spinal trauma and severe optic damage. He was to be pronounced permanently paralyzed from the neck down and totally irreversibly blind. Diego wanted to see exactly how the vultures would circle when they thought the lion was dead. The return to the sprawling Ramos estate was a masterclass in theatrical tragedy. Diego was wheeled into his grand, opulent master bedroom, staring blankly ahead, his body rigid and unresponsive. Sitting in that custom-built medical bed, he engaged in the most grueling physical and mental endurance test of his life. He kept his eyes unfocused. A milky film provided by special contact lenses Pendleton had sourced and stilled every muscle in his body. His fiancée, Bianca Moretti, a former high-fashion model with a heart as cold as the diamonds resting on her collarbone, played the grieving lover perfectly for the cameras outside the estate. Inside, however, the facade crumbled within 48 hours. She refused to sleep in the same room. She complained about the smell of antiseptics, the whirring of the medical equipment, and the sheer inconvenience of having a vegetable occupying the master suite. Then came Vincent Ramos, Diego's younger brother. Vincent had always lived in Diego's shadow, carrying a simmering resentment masked by a charming, reckless smile. Vincent stepped up to manage the family's business affairs during Diego's tragic incapacity, with Bianca refusing to care for him and the senior nursing staff constantly dismissed because Bianca claimed they were too noisy. The grueling, unsavory task of tending to the incapacitated Mafia boss fell to the very bottom of the household hierarchy. It fell to Carrie Black. Carrie was a woman who had spent her entire life trying to be invisible, a task made immensely difficult by her physical size. She was undeniably fat, a fact the other staff members and Bianca never let her forget. She possessed a soft, round face, a heavy, deeply curved figure, and thick, sturdy legs that ached after 16-hour shifts. Carrie was usually relegated to the basement laundry or the deep cleaning tasks where the glamorous Bianca wouldn't have to look at her. Bianca despised Carrie's appearance, often mocking her weight and calling her a blight on the estate's aesthetic. But caring for a paralyzed man required heavy lifting, rolling him over to prevent bed sores, bathing him, and dealing with the grim realities of total physical dependency. None of the petty, slender maids upstairs wanted the job. So Carrie was thrust into the master suite, threatened with immediate termination and destitution if the boss died under her watch. Diego's first real interaction with Carrie happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. He lay perfectly still, listening to the heavy, uneven footsteps approaching his bed. He braced himself for the rough, indifferent handling he had experienced from the temporary nurses. Instead, a warm, remarkably soft hand rested gently on his shoulder. "Mr. Ramos," a voice whispered. It was timid, melodic, and trembling with a deep well of empathy. "My name is Carrie. I'm going to be taking care of you from now on. I know you can't see me, and I know you can't move, but I am going to make sure you're comfortable. I promise." Diego kept his breathing shallow, his face a mask of tragic vacancy. Beneath the covers, his heart registered a strange, unfamiliar beat. In his world of blood, extortion, and superficial glamour, nobody made promises without a price. Yet this heavy-set, exhausted maid was speaking to a man she believed was utterly broken, with a reverence he hadn't heard since his mother died. Carrie moved clumsily, but with immense care. She struggled slightly with her own weight as she leaned over the wide mattress to adjust his pillows. Her breathing growing labored. Diego, viewing her through the hazy slits of his half-closed eyes, saw a woman whose uniform stretched tight across her wide hips and heavy chest. Her face flushed with exertion, yet her touch was profoundly tender. She didn't treat him like a corpse or a piece of ruined furniture. She treated him like a king who was simply resting. Weeks bled into a torturous month. Diego perfected his performance. He endured the agonizing stiffness in his muscles, waiting until the dead of night, when Carrie was asleep in the adjoining servant's alcove, to silently stretch and maintain his physical strength. During the day, he was a prisoner in his own mind, gathering intelligence. The truth of his betrayal unfolded right at the foot of his bed. Vincent and Bianca, believing Diego was entirely devoid of sight, movement, and cognitive presence, grew bold, disgustingly bold. They no longer bothered to leave the room to conduct their treachery. One evening, while Carrie was in the kitchen preparing Diego's specialized liquid diet, the bedroom door clicked shut. Diego stared blankly at the ceiling, sensing the shift in the air. God, the smell of this room is depressing. Bianca's sharp voice sliced through the silence. The clinking of crystal glasses followed. Vincent was pouring from Diego's private reserve of Macallan. "It won't be for much longer, baby." Vincent replied smoothly. Diego saw their blurry silhouettes merge at the foot of his bed. He watched, an inferno of rage igniting in his chest as his brother's hands roamed over his fiancée's waist. "The capos are getting restless," Vincent continued, kissing Bianca's neck. "They know Azitya can't run the Ramos family. I've scheduled a sit-down for next week. Once the council officially votes to transfer leadership to me, we can finally move him to a long-term care facility. Let him rot in some sterile room in Switzerland. Just make sure the bank accounts are fully transferred first," Bianca murmured, not even glancing at the man she had promised to. "I didn't waste 3 years of my life pretending to love this cold-hearted bastard to walk away with a mere allowance." Diego's jaw tightened infinitesimally, a twitch masked by the dim lighting. His own brother, his future wife. They had orchestrated the crash. They were looting his empire while using his comatose state as a shield. The betrayal was a physical ache, a hard karma for a life spent trusting the wrong people based on blood and beauty rather than loyalty. Their vile embrace was interrupted by the heavy squeak of the door. Carrie walked in, carefully balancing a silver tray holding Diego's dinner and fresh linens. Bianca instantly stepped away from Vincent, her face twisting into a sneer of pure disgust. "Watch where you're stepping, you clumsy cow. If you spill that on the Persian rug, I'll have the cost taken out of your miserable wages for the rest of the year." Carrie kept her head down, her double chin pressing into her collar as she shrank into herself. "I'm sorry, Miss Moretti. I was just bringing Mr. Ramos his dinner. Just feed the vegetable and get out of our sight." Vincent scoffed, adjusting his cuffs. "It's a miracle you haven't eaten his food yourself, Carrie. Look at you. Disgusting." Carrie's face burned a deep, humiliated crimson. She said nothing, absorbing the cruel words like a sponge that had long ago reached its capacity for pain. She waited silently until Vincent and Bianca strutted out of the room, leaving a trail of expensive cologne and shattered trust in their wake. Once the door closed, Diego listened closely. He expected Carrie to sigh, maybe handle him roughly out of frustration, or rush through her duties. Instead, he heard a soft, muffled sniffle. Carrie walked over to his bedside. She set the tray down with trembling hands. Through his slitted eyes, he saw tears carving tracks down her plump, flushed cheeks. "I'm sorry you have to hear them," Carrie whispered, taking a warm washcloth and gently wiping the corner of Diego's mouth, preparing him for the feeding tube. "You don't deserve this. You built this family. You built this house, and they treat you like you're already gone." She sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping significantly under her weight. For the first time in his ruthless life, Diego felt an overwhelming urge to reach out. He wanted to wipe the tears from this woman's face. He wanted to wrap his hands around Vincent's throat for speaking to her that way. "They think I'm stupid," Carrie continued softly, carefully administering his liquid meal. "They think because I'm fat and quiet, I don't notice things. I know they're stealing from you, Mr. Ramos. I see the papers Vincent brings in. But I'm just a maid. If I speak up, they'll kill me." She paused, her thumb gently stroking the back of his paralyzed, calloused hand. "But I won't leave you. I won't let them send you away alone." Diego's heart seized. Here was a woman who had absolutely nothing. A woman who was mocked, overworked, and treated like dirt on the bottom of a designer shoe. Yet her loyalty to a broken man who couldn't even say thank you was absolute. She wasn't staying for money. She wasn't staying for power. She was staying out of pure, unadulterated human decency. In the dark shadows of his famed prison, the Mafia boss realized something profound. His empire was crumbling. His family was a den of vipers. But in the center of the wreckage, he had found a rare, unpolished diamond. As the week progressed toward Vincent's planned, hostile takeover, the atmosphere in the mansion grew volatile. The impending syndicate meeting meant Vincent needed to assert total dominance, and he took immense pleasure in doing so by degrading Diego in front of his loyalists. It was a Thursday afternoon when Vincent brought 3 high-ranking capos into the master bedroom. Diego lay perfectly still, his breathing shallow, absorbing the heavy scent of cigar smoke and expensive leather that the men brought into his sanctuary. "Look at him," Vincent announced, gesturing grandly to Diego's motionless form. "A tragic loss, gentlemen. My brother was a titan, but now he's a monument to fragility. The doctors say his brain is effectively mush. He's a shell." The capos shifted uncomfortably. 2 of them had fought alongside Diego in the bloody street wars a decade prior. To see their formidable boss reduced to a breathing corpse was deeply unnerving. "We need strong leadership, Vincent," muttered Carlo, an older, grizzled enforcer. "The Colombians are testing our borders at the docks. We can't afford a vacuum." "There is no vacuum, Carlo," Vincent said sharply. "I am here. The transition will be seamless. Diego would want me to take the throne." Before Carlo could respond, the bedroom door opened. Carrie entered, carrying a basin of warm water and medical sponges for Diego's afternoon bath. Seeing the room full of dangerous armed men, she froze, her large frame trembling slightly under her grey uniform. Vincent's eyes narrowed. "What do you want, Whale?" Carrie swallowed hard, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the basin. "It's time for Mr. Ramos's physical therapy and bathing, sir." "His muscles will atrophy if I don't get out," Vincent snapped. "We are conducting family business." "Sir, please," Carrie insisted, her voice shaking but holding a stubborn thread of courage. "Dr. Pendleton's orders were strict. He needs to be moved every 4 hours, or he will develop sores." Vincent crossed the room in 3 long strides. Without a word, he raised his hand and slapped Carrie viciously across her soft cheek. The resounding crack echoed in the silent room. The basin of water slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor and soaking the expensive rug. Diego's mind roared. Every instinct, every violent impulse honed over 30 years of surviving the underworld, screamed at him to rise from the bed, to draw the hidden pistol taped under his mattress, and put a bullet directly between his brother's eyes. His jaw locked so tightly, his teeth ground together. A vein pulsed visibly in his neck, a tiny betrayal of his act. Though no one noticed in the chaos, he forced himself to remain paralyzed, swallowing the white-hot fury that threatened to consume him. Not yet, Diego told himself, his internal voice cold and deadly. Not yet. Carrie gasped, a hand flying to her reddened cheek. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't retreat. She looked at Vincent, then down at the spilled water, and finally at Diego's motionless face. "Clean this up and get out of my sight," Vincent spat, And if you ever interrupt me again, you won't just be out of a job. You'll be out of breathing privileges." The capos looked away, uncomfortable with the unnecessary cruelty, but none intervened. They filed out behind Vincent, leaving Carrie alone with the Mafia boss. Slowly, painfully, Carrie sank to her knees. She grabbed a towel and began soaking up the spilled water. Sobs racked her heavy shoulders, her breathing hitching as the adrenaline faded, leaving only raw humiliation and fear. Clear's throat. Diego lay there, listening to her cry. It was the worst sound he had ever heard, worse than the screams of his enemies, worse than the crunch of metal during the crash. It was the sound of an innocent soul being crushed for trying to protect him. When she finished cleaning the floor, she slowly pushed herself up, her knees popping under her weight. She walked over to Diego, her face stained with tears and a brutal red handprint blooming on her cheek. She took a fresh washcloth, dipped it in clean water, and began to wash his face, her touch as gentle as ever. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Ramos. I couldn't protect you from them. I'm just me. I'm nothing." She rested her forehead against the edge of his mattress, weeping softly into the blankets. Diego's heart shattered and reformed into something jagged and terrifyingly focused. She thought she was nothing. She thought her weight, her status, and her timid nature made her worthless. But to Diego, she was the only real thing left in his world. She possessed a courage that rivaled his best soldiers, standing up to a room full of mobsters simply to ensure he was bathed. That night, after Carrie had fallen asleep in the small cot in the adjoining room, the mansion grew completely silent. Diego Ramos opened his eyes. The milky film was gone, rubbed away hours ago. His dark, sharp eyes swept the room, taking in every detail. Slowly, methodically, he moved his right hand, then his left. He sat up, his massive chest expanding as he took his first deep, unhindered breath in over a month. His muscles burned with disuse, but the sheer force of his willpower overrode the pain. He slipped silently from the bed, his bare feet touching the cold hardwood. He walked to the adjoining door and peered inside. Carrie was sleeping soundly, curled into a ball on the far too small cot, her breathing a soft, rhythmic hum, even in sleep. Her face carried the tension of the day's abuse, the red mark still faintly visible in the moonlight. Diego stood over her for a long moment. He reached out, his lethal hands hovering just inches from her cheek, wanting to comfort her, but knowing if she woke up now, it would ruin the plan. "You are not nothing, Carrie," he whispered into the dark, his voice a gravelly, rusty rasp from weeks of disuse. "You are going to own this city." Returning to his bedroom, Diego moved to a false panel behind a grand bookshelf. He entered a sequence into the hidden keypad, opening a small safe. Inside were 3 burner phones, a ledger, and an untraceable satellite communicator. He grabbed the communicator and dialed a number that hadn't been called in 5 years. It belonged to an old friend, a ghost in the underworld, who owed Diego his life, a man entirely outside the Ramos family structure. The line clicked. "It's Diego," he said softly, his eyes burning with the promise of absolute ruin for his enemies. "I need an extraction team, an untraceable account, and a meeting with the heads of the 5 families. It's time to rise from the dead. The trap was set. Vincent and Bianca thought they had outsmarted the devil, but they forgot that the devil sees everything in the dark. And he was about to bring hell directly to their doorstep. Nighttime in the Ramos estate became Diego's true domain. Once the clock struck 2 o'clock in the morning, and the heavy, exhausted breathing of Carrie drifted from the adjoining servants' alcove, the paralyzed Mafia boss was resurrected. He moved like a phantom, slipping silently from the high-tech medical bed. Diego engaged in grueling, silent calisthenics on the thick Persian rug. He did push-ups until his arms trembled, and held planks until his whole burned, desperately fighting the muscle atrophy that threatened to make his fake paralysis a permanent reality. Every drop of sweat was a testament to his lethal patience. He had built his empire through ruthless calculation, and dismantling his treacherous family would require the exact same precision. Through the encrypted satellite communicator, he kept hidden behind the false wall panel. Diego orchestrated his counter-strike. He had made contact with Thomas Callahan, an independent financial fixer, and a fiercely loyal associate who operated strictly off the syndicate's radar. Thomas was a ghost in the banking world, capable of moving millions without triggering a single algorithm. "They're moving the assets, Dom." Thomas's voice crackled softly through the earpiece. One humid Tuesday night, Vincent authorized a wire transfer of $40 million from the shell accounts in the Caymans to a private trust in Geneva. The trust is under Bianca's maiden name. Diego leaned against the cold mahogany of his bookshelf, a dark, dangerous smirk playing on his lips. Perfect. Let them move it. The moment the funds hit the Geneva account, I want you to freeze it. Use the backdoor codes I gave you. Let them think they have the money, but ensure they can't touch a single cent. Consider it done. "And the syndicate meeting?" Thomas asked. "Vincent has called a vote for this Friday," Diego replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "He plans to officially declare me unfit and to take the throne. Have our extraction team ready by Thursday night. But before I burn this house to the ground, I need to make sure Carrie is safe." "The maid?" Thomas sounded bewildered. "Dom, you're risking the entire operation for collateral?" "She's not collateral, Tommy. She's the only innocent soul left in this God-forsaken family. Ensure there is a secure vehicle ready for her." Diego disconnected the line and slipped the communicator back into the safe. He turned toward the open door of the servants' quarters. He walked silently to the threshold, watching Carrie sleep. She had worked a grueling 18-hour day. Bianca had deliberately spilled red wine on the white marble staircase, just to force Carrie to scrub it on her hands and knees. Diego had lain in his bed, listening to Carrie's labored breathing and soft grunts of exertion from the hallway. His hands curled into tight, agonizing fists under the blankets. Now, in the moonlight, her face was completely relaxed, free from the constant anxiety she wore during the day. Her thick dark hair spilled over the cheap, thin pillow. To the superficial eyes of Bianca and Vincent, Carrie was an invisible, overweight subservient. To Diego, she was the anchor keeping his humanity tethered to the earth. He memorized the soft curve of her cheek, the full pout of her lips, and the sturdy, resilient shape of her body. He retreated to his bed, just as dawn threatened to break, slipping back into his catatonic facade mere minutes before Carrie's alarm buzzed. The daytime routine resumed, but a profound shift had occurred within the master suite. Carrie, believing Diego was trapped in the lonely, dark void of his own mind, began to speak to him more openly. She treated him as a confidant, a silent confessional, for a woman who had spent her life being silenced. "They brought in my new uniform today, Mr. Ramos," Carrie murmured one afternoon, gently massaging his legs to promote blood flow. Her hands were strong, her touch firm but incredibly soothing. "It's 2 sizes too small. Miss Moretti ordered it specifically. She laughed when I tried to button it. She said I looked like a stuffed sausage." Diego kept his breathing steady, though a violent inferno raged in his chest. "I will cut out her tongue," he promised silently. Carrie sighed, a heavy, sorrowful sound that seemed to pull from the very bottom of her lungs. "I know I'm fat. I've been heavy my whole life. My mother used to say I took up too much space in the world. So I tried to shrink my voice, my presence. But working here, taking care of you, it's the first time I feel like I'm doing something that actually matters. You don't judge me. You don't look at me with disgust." She paused, wiping a stray tear from her cheek, before moving her hands to his shoulders. "I heard Vincent talking on the phone today," Carrie continued, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "He was talking to a man named Gregory. He said after Friday they won't need the medical equipment anymore. They're going to move you to a state-run hospice, a place where people go to be forgotten." Her fingers tightened on his shoulder. "I won't let them. I've been saving my wages. It's not much, but I found a private care facility in Tuscany. I'm going to take you there. I don't care if I have to steal a van to do it. You are not going to die alone in a terrible place. I promise you, Diego." It was the first time she had used his first name. Diego's heart slammed against his ribs. She was planning to kidnap a Mafia boss to save his life, funded by a maid's meager salary. The sheer, terrifying bravery of this woman astounded him. She was putting a target on her own back out of pure, selfless devotion. He desperately wanted to open his eyes. He wanted to pull her heavy, warm body against his chest, to tell her that she would never have to worry about money, safety, or cruel words ever again. He wanted to claim her, but the trap wasn't fully set. If he moved now, Vincent would kill them both. Diego forced himself to remain a statue, counting down the hours until Friday. Tension in the Ramos estate hung in the air like a thick, suffocating fog. It was Thursday, the eve of the syndicate vote. Vincent was vibrating with a manic, arrogant energy, parading around the mansion as if he already wore the crown. Bianca was equally insufferable, snapping at the staff and openly discussing her plans to redecorate the master suite the moment Diego was shipped off. The fatal mistake happened at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Carrie was in the master bathroom, quietly organizing Diego's medical supplies. Her presence masked by the running water of the sink. She had left the bathroom door slightly ajar. Vincent and Bianca entered the bedroom, their voices sharp and unguarded. "The mechanic from the garage called," Vincent said, pacing furiously at the foot of Diego's bed. "He's getting nervous. He says the police are sniffing around the wreckage again." He wants double his payout for cutting the brake lines, or he's going to talk, then have Gregory silence him. Bianca scoffed, the rustle of her silk dress echoing in the room. We didn't orchestrate this masterpiece just to be blackmailed by a grease monkey. Is the money secure in Geneva? The transfer went through yesterday. 40 million. Untouchable. Vincent laughed, a cruel, echoing sound. He walked over to Diego's bed, leaning over his brother's motionless body. Do you hear that, Dom? Your empire, your money, your woman, all mine. Tomorrow the council makes it official. And you? You're going to a lovely little clinic where the nurses barely speak English. And the life support has a funny habit of failing during thunderstorms. In the bathroom, Carrie clapped a hand over her mouth to muffle a gasp. Her wide eyes stared at her own reflection in the mirror, horror draining the color from her face. She had suspected they were stealing. She had known they were cruel. But attempted murder? They had caused the crash. They had broken Diego. Her heavy chest heaved as panic set in. She had to do something. She couldn't just kidnap Diego. She had to go to the police. She had to tell the capos. As she took a frantic step backward, her hip caught the edge of a metal medical tray. It clattered to the tiled floor with a deafening crash. Silence instantly fell over the bedroom. Who is in there? Vincent's voice was suddenly cold, devoid of its previous arrogant warmth. Carrie froze. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying for invisibility. Heavy, deliberate footsteps approached the bathroom. The door was kicked open, slamming against the wall. Vincent stood in the doorway, his eyes darting from the spilled tray to Carrie's terrified, pale face. How long have you been in here? Vincent demanded, his hand dropping to the holster, concealed under his tailored suit jacket. I was just cleaning. Carrie stammered, her voice shaking violently. She backed up against the cold porcelain of the bathtub. I didn't hear anything. I swear, Mr. Ramos. Bianca appeared behind Vincent, her eyes narrowing into vicious slits. She's lying. Look at her sweating like a pig. She heard everything. Vincent drew his pistol, the sleek black metal gleaming in the harsh bathroom light. He pointed it directly at Carrie's chest. You really are a nuisance, Carrie. I was going to let you go tomorrow. Fire you, send you back to whatever slum you crawled out of. But now you're a liability. Please, Carrie begged, tears spilling over her flushed cheeks. I won't say a word. I just want to take care of him. Please don't do this. Take care of him? Vincent sneered, stepping into the bathroom and pressing the cold barrel of the gun against Carrie's forehead. He's a vegetable. He's nothing, and you're just a fat, pathetic maid who thought she could play nurse. Gregory, Vincent yelled over his shoulder for his enforcer. Get in here. We have a mess to clean up. Carrie squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming freely now. She thought of her mother. She thought of her miserable, lonely life. And then she thought of Diego, lying helplessly in the next room. I failed you, she thought, her heart breaking not for herself, but for the man she couldn't save. She braced for the gunshot. But the gunshot never came. Instead, a sound ripped through the bedroom that froze the blood in Vincent's veins. It was a dark, rumbling, terrifyingly familiar voice. Take the gun off her, Vincent. Vincent stiffened. Bianca let out a blood-curdling shriek from the bedroom. Slowly, Vincent turned his head, his hand still holding the gun against Carrie, but his eyes wide with a terror he hadn't felt since he was a child. Standing in the doorway of the bathroom was Diego Ramos. He was not paralyzed. He was not blind. He stood at his full 6'4" height, his broad shoulders filling the doorframe, muscles coiled and trembling with lethal intent. His dark eyes, devoid of the milky lenses he had discarded moments ago, burned with a predatory fury that promised absolute devastation. Carrie gasped, her eyes snapping open. She stared at Diego, her mind completely unable to process the impossible sight before her. He was standing. He was looking right at her. "Diego?" Vincent whispered, the pistol trembling in his hand. "How? I said. Diego's voice was a lethal, quiet hiss. "Take the gun off, my woman." Before Vincent could even twitch his trigger finger, Diego moved. He crossed the short distance with terrifying speed, a predator closing in on its prey. He grabbed Vincent's wrist with his left hand, crushing the bones with a sickening crunch. Vincent screamed, dropping the gun. Diego didn't stop. He drove his right fist directly into Vincent's throat, a precise, calculated strike that crushed his brother's windpipe, just enough to incapacitate him without killing him instantly. Vincent collapsed to the bathroom floor, gagging and clawing at his neck, his face turning a deep shade of purple. Bianca was frozen by the bed, her hands covering her mouth, her manicured nails digging into her cheeks as she stared at the resurrected nightmare. Diego didn't even look at his brother writhing on the tiles. He turned immediately to Carrie. She was sliding down the wall, her heavy legs finally giving out from the sheer terror and shock. Diego caught her before she hit the floor. He wrapped his massive arms around her thick, trembling frame, pulling her tightly against his broad chest. "I've got you," Diego whispered fiercely into her hair, his massive hand cradling the back of her head. "I've got you, Carrie. You're safe. I'm right here." You can see," she sobbed, burying her face into his shirt, her hands clutching at the fabric of his sweatpants as if he were an illusion that might vanish. "You can move. I see everything," Diego murmured, pressing a fierce, possessive kiss to her temple. "Especially you. You were the only one who stayed." Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Gregory, Vincent's massive enforcer, burst into the bedroom, drawing his weapon. Diego gently pushed Carrie behind him, shielding her entirely with his body. He smoothly picked up Vincent's dropped pistol from the floor in one fluid motion. Without hesitation, without a single shred of mercy, Diego fired twice. Gregory dropped dead in the doorway before he even registered that the boss was awake. Diego turned his dark, dead eyes to Bianca, who collapsed to her knees, sobbing hysterically. "Please, Diego, please." Bianca wailed, crawling toward him. "It was Vincent. He made me do it. I love you." Diego looked at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. "The Geneva account is frozen, Bianca. You have nothing. You are nothing." He pointed the gun at the floor near her knees. "Don't move, don't speak, or you join Gregory." He turned back to Carrie, his expression softening instantly. He reached out, his thumb gently wiping a tear from her flushed, plump cheek. "Pack a bag, Carrie," Diego said softly, though his voice carried the unshakable authority of a king reclaiming his throne. We are leaving. Tonight this empire burns. Tomorrow we build a new one. The master suite, once a sterile prison of feigned paralysis, had transformed into a theater of absolute judgment. Diego Ramos stood over the wreckage of his brother's ambition, the stolen pistol gripped casually in his massive hand. Vincent lay on the expensive Persian rug, clutching his crushed windpipe, his face a mottled canvas of purple and grey as he struggled for shallow, agonizing breaths. Bianca remained frozen by the bed, her glamorous facade entirely melted away into a puddle of mascara and pathetic whimpers. Diego pulled out the untraceable satellite phone from his pocket and pressed a single-speed dial button. Thomas. Diego's voice was eerily calm, a stark contrast to the violence he had just unleashed. The timeline has moved up. Gregory is dead. Bring the extraction team to the master suite and call the capos, all of them. Tell them the syndicate vote is happening tonight, right here, in 30 minutes. Anyone doesn't show is declaring war. He hung up, the click of the phone sounding like a gavel dropping in a courtroom. He turned his attention back to Carrie. She was shaking violently, her wide eyes darting between the dead enforcer in the doorway and the towering, resurrected Mafia boss in front of her. Her heavy chest rose and fell in rapid, terrified gasps. Diego gently set the gun on the bedside table and approached her, holding his hands up to show he meant no harm. "Carrie, look at me," he commanded softly. She blinked, tears spilling over her plump cheeks as she met his dark, intense gaze. "You are the bravest woman I have ever met," Diego said, his voice dropping to a gravelly register that vibrated with absolute sincerity. "While the people who shared my blood and my bed plotted to murder me, you, a woman who owed me nothing, a woman who was treated ruthlessly by this house, risked your life to protect me. I will never forget that. But right now, I need you to be brave for just a little while longer. Can you do that?" Carrie swallowed hard, her double chin trembling, but she nodded slowly. The profound respect in Diego's eyes anchored her panicked mind. What? What do you want me to do?" "Go into Bianca's closet," Diego instructed, not even sparing a glance for his cowering ex-fiancée. "Take the warmest, most expensive coat she owns. Leave that grey uniform behind. You are never wearing it again." Bianca let out a strangled sob of protest, but instantly silenced herself when Diego's lethal gaze snapped toward her. As Carrie hesitantly moved toward the walk-in closet, the heavy oak doors of the master suite swung open. Thomas Callahan stepped in, followed by 4 heavily armed, black-clad operatives. Thomas, a sharp-eyed man in a tailored suit, took in the scene. The dead body, the gasping brother, the weeping fiancée, and the towering boss, who was supposed to be a vegetable. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Dom," Thomas said, a grim smile touching his lips. "Clean up the trash in the doorway," Diego ordered, gesturing to Gregory's body. "Bind Vincent to that chair and pull up the financial dossiers on the monitors." Within 20 minutes, the atmosphere in the estate shifted from a hostile takeover to a terrifying tribunal. The 3 top capos, Carlo, Enzo, and Matteo, were escorted into the master bedroom. They entered with grim faces, expecting to find Vincent standing over a dying Diego. Instead, they froze in their tracks. Diego Ramos was sitting in a high-backed leather armchair, a lit cigar resting between his fingers. He looked like a king who had never lost his throne. In the center of the room, Vincent was tied tightly to a wooden chair, gagged and bleeding, while Bianca knelt beside him, shivering uncontrollably, standing just behind Diego's right shoulder, wearing a luxuriant, floor-length cashmere coat that belonged to Bianca, was Carrie. The coat couldn't hide her wide, curvy frame, but the way Diego subtly angled his body to shield her spoke volumes. She was under his absolute protection. "Gentlemen," Diego said smoothly, exhaling a plume of blue smoke, "please come in. I hear there's a vote regarding my competency." Carlo's jaw dropped. "Boss, we were told your spine was severed. Your mind was gone." "A necessary fiction," Diego replied, his eyes hardening into chips of obsidian. "I needed to see who would hold the line and who would hold the knife." He gestured to the large, flat-screen monitor on the wall, usually reserved for his financial briefings. Thomas typed furiously on a laptop, and the screen illuminated with documents. "Vincent and my lovely fiancée thought they were incredibly clever," Diego explained, his voice echoing with dangerous authority. "They bribed a mechanic to cut the brake lines of my SUV. When that failed to kill me, they decided to loot the empire. Look at the screen." The capos stared as bank records flashed before their eyes. "This is a routing number for Julius Baer, an exclusive private bank in Zurich," Diego continued, naming the highly guarded financial institution. Vincent authorized a transfer of $40 million into a trust under Bianca's maiden name. He was draining the family's war chest to fund his retirement, while planning to ship me to a hospice to die of natural causes by the weekend. The room erupted into furious murmurs. Carlo, the oldest and most traditional of the enforcers, stepped forward, his hand resting on the grip of his holstered weapon. Treason against the boss. Treason against the blood. "The money in the Julius Baer account has already been frozen by Thomas," Diego stated. "They have nothing. Now the punishment." Diego stood up, stubbing out his cigar. He walked over to Bianca, who flinched, curling into a tight ball. "You hated Carrie," Diego said softly to Bianca, though the entire room could hear the venom in his voice. "You mocked her weight. You treated her like a slave. You thought you were untouchable because of a pretty face and a silk dress. Strip off the jewelry." Bianca sobbed frantically, pulling off her diamond engagement ring, her tennis bracelets, and her pearl earrings, dropping them onto the carpet. "Thomas," Diego ordered, "escort Miss Moretti out the front gates. She leaves with exactly what she brought into this family. Absolutely nothing. Freeze her credit lines. Blacklist her name from every designer, every hotel, and every restaurant in our territory. Let her see how the real world treats a woman with no soul and no money." "No. Diego, please. I won't survive out there." Bianca screamed as two operatives grabbed her arms and dragged her, kicking and screaming, from the bedroom. Diego didn't blink. He turned to his brother. Vincent's eyes were wide with a pathetic, desperate terror. The arrogant smirk was completely gone, replaced by the horrifying realization of hard karma. "You wanted to run in family, brother," Diego whispered, leaning close so only Vincent and the capos could hear. "But you forgot the first rule of our world. You always confirm the kill. Diego looked at Carlo. He's no longer a Ramos. Take him to the warehouse by the docks. Make it last. I want him to feel exactly how trapped and helpless I felt in that bed. With pleasure, boss, Carlo growled. As Vincent was dragged away, his muffled screams echoing down the hallway, Diego turned back to the remaining capos. The Ramos family is purged of its poison. The transition of power is cancelled. We go back to business tomorrow. Understood? Yes, boss. The men answered in unison, bowing their heads in deep, renewed respect. When the room finally cleared, leaving only Thomas standing guard by the door, Diego turned back to Carrie. She was trembling, gripping the edges of the cashmere coat tightly around her heavy waist. She had just witnessed the brutal, unforgiving reality of the Mafia underworld. "Are you afraid of me, Carrie?" Diego asked quietly, the dangerous edge completely vanishing from his voice. Carrie looked up at him. She saw the blood on his knuckles, the ruthless calculation in his eyes, but she also remembered the man who had let her cry against his mattress, the man who had shielded her with his own body. She took a deep breath, her broad chest rising under the coat. "I am afraid of this world," she answered honestly, "but I am not afraid of you." Diego's lips curved into a genuine, breathtaking smile. He closed the distance between them, gently taking her soft, thick hands in his own. "Good," Diego murmured, "because a VistaJet Bombardier Global 7500 is waiting for us at the private airstrip. We are leaving this house of ghosts. I'm taking you somewhere safe, somewhere beautiful." 6 months later, the Mediterranean sun beat down warmly on the sprawling terrace of a heavily fortified private villa in Tuscany. The Ramos syndicate had not just recovered. Under Diego's absolute, uncontested rule, it had expanded. The purge of Vincent's loyalists had sent a terrifying message through the criminal underworld. Diego Ramos was untouchable, and he saw everything. But the most shocking transformation was not in the Mafia's ledgers. It was in the woman who sat on a plush lounger overlooking the vineyards. Carrie Black was no longer a maid. She was the undisputed queen of the Ramos Empire. She had not magically become thin. She was still a remarkably fat, deeply curved woman, a physical reality that Diego absolutely worshipped. In a world populated by starving supermodels and surgically enhanced socialites, Carrie was a portrait of soft, abundant, unapologetic warmth. Diego had hired the finest tailors in Milan to craft a wardrobe exclusively for her. Today, she wore a flowing emerald green silk dress that draped perfectly over her wide hips and accentuated her heavy, beautiful chest. Her dark hair, once tied back in a harsh, practical bun, now fell in loose, shining waves over her shoulders. The timid, terrified posture of a bullied servant was gone, replaced by a quiet, grounded confidence. She was reading a leather-bound book when heavy footsteps approached from behind. Diego leaned over the back of the lounger, pressing a deep, lingering kiss to the soft curve of her neck. "The meeting with the Colombians went well," Diego murmured, his voice a low, soothing rumble against her skin. "They agreed to our terms." Carrie smiled, tilting her head to give him better access. "Did you have to threaten them?" "Only a little," Diego chuckled, walking around the lounger to sit on the edge. He reached out, resting his large, calloused hand affectionately on her thick thigh. The possessive weight of his touch sent a familiar thrill through her, but I told them I had a strict deadline to get back to my wife. They understood. Wife. They had been married privately in a small, ancient chapel on the estate 2 months ago. There were no cameras, no flashy magazines, just Thomas, Dr. Pendleton, and a few trusted capos. Diego's devotion to her was absolute, bordering on legendary within the family. His soldiers knew that Diego was a ruthless boss, but they also knew that Carrie was the heart of the operation. She had quietly started a foundation, funded by the Ramos Empire, protecting marginalized workers and funding safe houses. The men who once might have sneered at a fat maid now bowed their heads with genuine reverence when Carrie walked into a room. They knew she had faced down a loaded gun to protect their boss. Thomas sent an update from New York, Diego said casually, trailing his thumb over the soft fabric of her dress. Carrie raised an eyebrow. Oh, does it concern our old friends? Diego smirked, a dark, satisfying expression. Hard karma was a dish Diego enjoyed serving cold, and the universe had a beautiful way of completing the circle. It seems Bianca has found new employment, Diego stated, pulling a printed photograph from his jacket pocket and handing it to Carrie. Carrie looked at the photo. It was a grainy surveillance shot taken outside a cheap, run-down motel on the outskirts of Queens. There was Bianca, stripped of all her designer clothes, her hair frizzy and unkempt, wearing a deeply unflattering, oversized grey maid's uniform. She was struggling to push a heavy cleaning cart over a cracked sidewalk. Because Diego had blacklisted her from every high-paying industry and drained her stolen accounts, Bianca had been forced into the only job that required no background check and no references. She was doing the exact same grueling, back-breaking labor she had once mocked Carrie for, earning pennies to survive. And Vincent? Carrie asked softly, handing the photo back. Diego's eyes darkened, the memory of his brother's betrayal still a cold stone in his chest. Vincent is no longer a concern. Carlo was very thorough. He resides in a concrete box where he can't move, can't see the sun, and can't hurt anyone ever again. He's exactly what he tried to make me. Carrie absorbed the information. She didn't feel joy at their suffering, but she felt a profound sense of justice. She had spent her life shrinking to make others comfortable, enduring abuse because she felt she deserved it. But Diego had taught her that loyalty, kindness, and bravery were the true currencies of worth. Diego cupped her round, soft cheek, his thumb gently brushing across her skin. You look beautiful today, Mia Regina. Carrie's face flushed, a beautiful crimson that Diego loved. Even though I ate half of that incredible lemon tart the chef made for breakfast, she teased, placing her hand over his. I hope you eat the other half for dinner, Diego replied fiercely, his gaze dropping to her full lips. I love every single inch of you, Carrie. Exactly as you are. You brought me back to life in the dark. I intend to spend the rest of mine keeping you in the light. He leaned in, capturing her lips in a passionate, consuming kiss. Carrie melted into him, wrapping her arms around his broad shoulders. She was heavy. She was soft. And she was fiercely loved by the most dangerous man in the world. The Mafia boss had faked his destruction to flush out his enemies, but in the ashes of his broken family, he had found a treasure far more valuable than his empire. He had found a woman whose heart was as immense as her courage, a curvy maid who became a queen, proving that true power isn't in how loudly you command a room, but in who stays to hold your hand when the room goes entirely dark. If you loved this dramatic tale of betrayal, undeniable hard karma, and a curvy heroine who proves that true loyalty is the ultimate power, please hit that like button. Share this story with your friends who love a good mafia romance filled with twists. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, pulse-pounding audio dramas. Drop a comment below and let us know your favorite moment of Diego's revenge. See you in the next story.